And it is time for us to turn our attention to American football, and we're talking on the snap this week with Cian Fahey. We also have Ronan Mullen with us. Cian, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, Jar. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm like we are all waking up to the news that Tom Brady is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. There's going to be a pirate ship at the end of the stadium that he looks at every week when he's playing. What's going on?
Yeah, well, this has been anticipated for a long time, but it's one of those things you anticipate and then don't expect to actually happen and be real when it comes down to it, which is what I said last week on the podcast, which I've kind of made myself look foolish and undercut myself a little bit because I've been saying for a while that the Buccaneers make a lot of sense, but then at the last moment they just felt like he'd go back to the Patriots. And apparently, we've heard about acrimony behind the scenes, problems behind the scenes for the last year. We've never got any real specific details. But over the last 24 hours, we've heard that Brady threatened to walk out of a practice before the start of was the 19 season where he had over a dispute about money. He did not actually get a firm offer from the Patriots in this negotiation. So it's very much a case of the Patriots saying, "Hey, we don't really want you. You may want to leave as well, but we don't really want you back." So there's a lot more that's going to come out of this. But for the moment, we have Tom Brady moving from the AFC, the Patriots, one of the teams that everyone cares about in the worldwide. Everyone knows about. Tom Brady himself is a brand that everyone knows about, to a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that is largely irrelevant. It has a lot of talent, but as a brand, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in Tampa Bay. The only people who care about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in Tampa Bay. So they're not even the biggest team in Florida.
Well, it's just struck me that this might be very good news for Manchester United fans when it comes to trying to sign a global superstar. The Glazers are going to go, hey, hang on a second, what if we were to add some top quality world class talent to the football team that we owe as well? Own.
I would call that the optimistic look. I think the Glazers might look at this and say, we're spending 30 million on Tom Brady. We're moving up towards hitting our minimum spend in the NFL that we have to spend now. The price of what we spend has just gone up, so maybe Bruno Fernandes is the only big player you get at Man United for the foreseeable future.
Right. Here, look, the Brady thing, the team that he's actually going to, right? It made sense in some aspects. It certainly made sense from he wanted to be on the East Coast. I actually thought that going to LA made far more sense. He's recently set up a production company. They do have loads of really good pieces. They're a few pieces short, but their receiving core is just as good. Maybe not quite just as good, but very good. And their defense has some brilliant parts to it, like Bosa and Derwin James. You kind of think, okay, being the face of a franchise in Los Angeles, the size of that market, suddenly he has base on both coasts. It's like, wow, that's where Tom Brady becomes this mega corporation over the next 10 years. Now he's gone to Tampa Bay. It's like a really quite small town. It's a bit off Broadway. Why do you think he'd pick this one?
Well, there's the football reasons make more sense. I think there are reasons that the Los Angeles Chargers would have been a better option. Keenan Allen is a perfect type of receiver for Tom Brady. Well, actually, he's a perfect type of receiver for Tom Brady in his prime. I'm not sure he's a perfect type of receiver for Tom Brady now. Keenan Allen is like a much better version of Julian Edelman, where he can get open underneath all the time whenever he wants. He can get open on intermediate routes. No coverage can actually contain him, so he's always going to create a window for you to throw into. In Tampa Bay, you've got Mike Evans, who doesn't really create much separation, but he's 6'6", and he can catch anything that's thrown anywhere close to him. You've also got Chris Godwin, who does the same thing. And then you've got OJ Howard, who is an Aaron Hernandez-style tight end, which Tom Brady has worked with before. Cameron Brate would be a Rob Gronkowski type of tight end, not as good as Rob Gronkowski, obviously, but stylistically, those players make a lot of sense. So the same problems existed in both places where the offensive lines weren't great. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a run-blocking offensive line, really. You've got Donovan Smith there at left tackle. The Chargers just traded for Trey Turner from the Carolina Panthers. They gave up Russell Okung, who rarely played for them. They just signed Brian Bulaga as well, I think. Brian Bulaga has had 3 ACL tears, is constantly injured, a former Green Bay Packer. He's going to a team that has the worst medical staff maybe in all of sports because all their players constantly get injured. Surpass the actual football fit. I would suggest the way that Brady has talked over recent years about him wanting to maximize his football income, the money he's earning in salary. Being in Florida, you're not getting taxed. Being in California, you're getting pretty heavily taxed. The costs of living in Tampa Bay, I know this doesn't apply necessarily to someone like Brady, but it does apply if you're not actually going to stay in that place permanently. The NFL season is very short, so Brady probably is going to rent a place in Tampa Bay, which will be dirt cheap relative to renting a place in LA and living in LA. So there are financial upsides to being in Tampa Bay opposed to being in LA. And with the way the world is, like, he can run his production company from anywhere. He's going to end up living in New York, end up living in LA the way he has his places currently. Being in Boston was always kind of this thing as well. It was a contentious issue because his wife doesn't necessarily want to be there. But he was in Boston for 20 years. He became a global superstar. He can do it from Tampa Bay as well.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Ronan Mullen's with us this morning. Ronan, how are you?
All good, Jer. Everything.
Any clever puns for us on Tom Brady? I hope you've been working them. And like the one thing that we all need in this time, right now, in the time of coronavirus, is some good puns from Ronan Mullen.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was totally correct, Jer, but I'll give you my hot take on this. I do think that TB12, it's more of a TB12 Inc. decision than a Tom Brady football decision. And we know he's a winner and he always wants to win, but this is very much about brand building. He put that number of age 45. He wants to play till he's 45. I think that's what this is all about. He knew there was no long-termism in New England. Like Bill Belichick put that on the table a couple of years ago. So he's, like you're mentioning, his options, but I think this was almost, he had to take whatever was coming, and Tampa Bay is a good fit for him in the end, I think.
So it seemed like he was pushing for San Francisco, and that wasn't actually realistically an option. But the Raiders in Vegas would have been pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and there's an absence of superstardom in Tampa Bay, as we said there. Los Angeles, I think we called pretty early, was a pretty obvious one. Like, it fit both parties. Like, it's an easy exposure for him and also exposure for them. They need to sell those seats because they're renting a stadium off the Rams. If you ask anyone what team plays in Los Angeles, they probably wouldn't even be able to name the Rams, let alone the Chargers. So I think that would have been an obvious fit. The Colts have gone down the Phillip Rivers line, which we would probably get to. But I think Tampa Bay would probably be asking themselves, is Tom Brady the right fit for us? Because they were sort of an all singing, all dancing offense last year. Jameis Winston had his 30 for 30 season, 30 picks and 30 touchdowns. But can Tom Brady really do those kind of down the field passes that Winston was trying last year? I'm not sure. I'm sure he can adapt.
Yeah.
But I know Bruce Arians was comically undermining Winston last year, saying if we had a quarterback, we'd be a playoff team. And
now he's got one.
They have a quarterback now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, Keane. What's your take on this? Like the down the field throws that Brady isn't able to do. Here's the point: if you've got Mike Evans, you don't need him to separate. You feck it up there, and he comes down with it.
Yes, and Brady's lack of velocity is less of an issue when you have someone like Mike Evans, because if the ball hangs up a little bit, he's the one who's likely to win it rather than the defensive back. On this, I have a Twitter account called QB Data Mine right now, which is QB Data Mine, all one word, obviously. And it's just simply tweeting out the charting I do and putting out the results I do. And Tom Brady and Jameis Winston this week were obviously two focal points. So the biggest difference between Tom Brady and Jameis Winston is that Brady is 10% worse on intermediate throws. On deep throws, they're actually the same. And when you consider who they were throwing to last year, Brady is probably a better deep passer, even with his declining velocity. Like, the thing about Jameis is Jameis has no idea how to play quarterback, and he's a bit of a complete disaster, really. So he had 30 interceptions last year. He had 21 more dropped. He could have had 50 interceptions last season, which means he wouldn't have been on the field, because if those passes had been caught, Bruce Arians would have benched him. And Arians basically came out and said, we can't win with this quarterback after the offseason. So you knew he wasn't coming back. For all of the highlight plays and all of the big plays, like, that's not really how you win games. That's not really how they win games. They were on the precipice of the playoffs last year, but Winston was the primary reason they didn't make the playoffs. Does Brady give them a chance to go to the Super Bowl? Probably not. I don't think they're going to be a contender in the NFC. There are better teams in the NFC. Like, take the Seattle Seahawks as an example. They're probably not the best team in the NFC. They'd be better than the Buccaneers next year. The positive is that Brady is a lot smarter. The question mark for me, less than downfield throws, is how he's going to fit behind the offensive line. So the benefit here is you've got to have a spread out offense where you get all those four weapons on the field all at the same time, which isn't something Tampa Bay has always done. And it's not something Bruce Arians likes to do. But you've got to get all your weapons on the field at the same time, the same way Josh McDaniels and the Patriots did, the same way Bill O'Brien and the Patriots did, same way the Patriots have done all through Brady's career, and give Brady the opportunity to get the ball out instantly. Because if he has that on quicker, shorter throws, you can change that offense, you can make that offense work. Because Mike Evans, while he's a massive guy, is also a rare talent in that he can run any route at any level. He can get open. He has very quick twitch fibers where he can make the quick movement as well as the long stride downfield. So if you change the offense up like that, it should work. And when Bruce Arians worked with Carson Palmer, and as much as Bruce Arians wants to work to a specific offense and drop deep in the pocket and throw the ball 30 and 40 yards downfield all the time, when Bruce Arians was in Arizona with Carson Palmer, that was the style of offense he ran. But he also went to Carson Palmer every week and said, give me your favorite 15 plays and we're going to focus on them. And that's how a good coach works. So Bruce Arians goes to Tom Brady and says, give me your favorite 15 plays, let's focus on them.
Yeah.
Those aren't going to be those deep shots. Those are going to be the shorter, quicker plays that they're going to cut teams to death with over and over and over again.
There's loads of other stories that we'll get to a little bit later on in the week in terms of the second wave of the Jadeveon Clowneys, where Cam Newton's going to end up on. But the other big breaking news over the last 24, 36 hours or so has been the absolute theft of Deandre Hopkins. For regular watchers, Bill O'Brien was the Penn State coach. We went over and watched him coach. He was very nice. He was very accommodating to us. I've followed his career since then, and mostly I've kind of been able to understand what he's been trying to do. But this is madness. DeAndre Hopkins is one of the best players in the league, and he has been given away for a handful of magic beans.
Yeah, I think the best. Let's stick with the Man United references here. If you took Odi and Igalo and you had Manchester United and you went to PSG and you said, can we have Kylian Mbappe? We'll give you Odi and Igalo. That's basically what just happened. The Arizona Cardinals gave David Johnson and a second-round pick to the Texans for DeAndre Hopkins and a fourth-round pick, I believe. So basically, they've dropped down 60 places in the draft and got one of the best wide receivers in the league, maybe the best wide receiver in the league. It's an inexplicable move, but it's the type of move that Bill O'Brien has been making. He's now the head coach and the GM of the team. And this is something we've talked about previously. You need to have two different minds there because the head coach is more emotional. The head coach is more irrational. He's someone who believes he can win with whatever roster he has, and he thinks anyone is can be dispensed with. And GM has to sit there and go, hey, DeAndre Hopkins is irreplaceable. We can't replace this guy. He's a little bit expensive, whatever you want to say. He's a key piece of all of our success. And last year, when the Texans were 24-0 up in the playoff game against the Chiefs, the problem wasn't DeAndre Hopkins, it was Bill O'Brien. So Bill O'Brien is hurting the Texans in season and hurting the Texans in the offseason. And this is actually a fascinating thing because the Cardinals have had a good offseason. They've added Jordan Phillips as well to the defensive line. They've made some very good moves so far. And DeAndre Hopkins comes in there now with Kyler Murray, who is an incredible deep passer. He's actually a more accurate overall quarterback than Deshaun Watson. He obviously has to grow a little bit more than Watson because he's at an earlier stage of his career. But you add DeAndre Hopkins there, you're getting a guy who is basically Larry Fitzgerald in his prime. I would argue he's better than what Larry Fitzgerald was, and Larry Fitzgerald is the Hall of Famer. So, Larry Fitzgerald is still there, but now Larry Fitzgerald gets to just be the slot receiver all the time, while Hopkins plays outside the numbers all the time. And that spread offense is going to be outstanding. And they've got Kenyon Drake in the backfield there anyway, assuming they re-sign him. So they have no concerns about losing David Johnson. They've swapped out an $11 million salary for David Johnson for a $12 million for DeAndre Hopkins. That's crazy. Stephon Diggs went immediately after and got so much more in reward. Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers in the league, but he's nowhere close to DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah,
it's such a weird comparison. Go on, Ronan, yeah?
No, I was just going to say, the minimum, surely, we saw with Amari Cooper when he went from the Raiders to Dallas, that the cost should be a minimum number one draft choice. For a first tier receiver, you need a first round draft choice because that's the equivalent. I know this is a very stacked wide receiver class and there's going to be people available second, third, fourth round, but there's just no reason for the Texans, who are actively shopping him, which I find utterly bizarre. It would have been different if someone dropped this on them and they weighed up their options and said, right, let's pull the trigger on this. But they were looking to get rid of this guy, talking about friction in the camp. But friction, Tom Brady and Belichick, by all accounts, have had friction for 15 years and they've still won multiple championships. So you have to park that stuff. And Diggs, we've mentioned there, he's never made a Pro Bowl in 5 seasons. Hopkins has been first-team All-Pro in the last 3 seasons. So this is the caliber of talent we're talking about. Is he the best receiver? He's definitely one of them. And I just find it baffling.
Brandon Cooks got a first round 2 successive seasons in a row, and we're getting literally a handful of magic beans. I'm saying it again. If you look back at what the Rams paid for Jalen Ramsey, who is an elite level similar to DeAndre Hopkins in a matching position, it was 2 first round picks and a second round, I think.
And Hayden Hurst just this weekend, Hayden Hurst, who people will remember infamously picked ahead of Lamar Jackson by the Ravens in that draft, has been traded to the Falcons for basically the same draft capital.
I think more. It's a third and a fifth, wasn't it? Because you're not taking back David Johnson, who's washed.
Yeah, well, second and the fourth, third and the fifth. We could argue the toss on that, but you're right. It's basically slightly more.
Is David Johnson washed, Cian?
He's on the way to be. He's very unfortunate. He's had a couple of bad injuries. Maybe you can say that it's actually just the life of a running back, because it's happened to Todd Gurley. It happens to pretty much everyone. The Hopkins trade is layered in a different way, in the sense that he has been previously outspoken about wanting to leave Houston, but that was when Bob McNair was still there, and Bob McNair is the owner who referred to his players as inmates running the asylum when they were I think it was in the lockout year in negotiations. Or it might have it was when Kaepernick kneeled.
Yeah.
So obviously he got in a lot of trouble for that, and Hopkins was one of the people who was outspoken about that. Dwayne Brown is someone they traded away, one of the best left tackles in the league. He's been great in Seattle. He did not want to be there anymore because of the culture in Houston and because of McNair. And they spent 2 first-round picks to replace him with Laramie Tunsil last year, which is another awful trade, because as good as Tunsil is, it's a crazy amount of capital to give up for a player, an individual left tackle. So the thing about that is this was surprising, because McNair is now dead, and Hopkins hasn't publicly said anything about wanting to leave. There was a little bit of speculation about 3 hours before the trade actually happened, but it wasn't even strong then. It was, hey, DeAndre Hopkins, some teams believe he might be available. So obviously that actually had fire to it, that smoke that kind of comes around all the time that you hear and you ignore. But the other aspect of this then is Hopkins afterwards had no sadness about this. He was immediately on Instagram Live showing that he was training. He was celebrating the trade immediately afterwards. It didn't feel like he was blindsided. But Deshaun Watson has talked about him and talked about how he doesn't know how he's going to replace him. And he seems to be in shock. He didn't seem to know what was coming. Players across the league have looked at this and said, this is insane. Cameron Hayward of the Pittsburgh Steelers said GMs should be drug tested, which kind of seems like a fair comment at this point when it comes to Bill O'Brien. But the on-field impact for the Texans is going to go surpass just losing a number 1 receiver, because Deshaun Watson is now going to be under a huge amount of pressure because they don't have a high-quality receiving core.
Well, Randall Cobb. Poor Randall Cobb. Look at you casting aspersions on a guy who, again, was washed up 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, they have Kenny Stills, who's very good, and they have Will Fuller, who's very good when healthy. But Will Fuller can probably play 10 games a season with the way his knees are. He doesn't always play, and that's been a big issue for them. And that's what's changed their offense, because when they've had 2 receivers running downfield and kept everyone else in pass protection and executed hard play fakes, Deshaun Watson's been incredibly good. But now they can't do that anymore because they don't have a receiver like Hopkins who's going to get open no matter what. So it completely changes the identity of the team, completely changes the offense. And the AFC South, like, between them, the Jaguars, and the Colts, this looks like a division that's setting up for the Titans to run away with it fairly easily next year, which is a weird thing, because over the last few years, that's always been a division where they've all been mediocre and everyone's been stuck together.
You mentioned the Colts. We should talk about them. Philip Rivers has it's been widely predicted for months that once he was done with the Chargers, that it would be the Colts, because he's got best mates up there. Is he not washed up? Is there any chance that he can make that work?
He's very washed up. Philip Rivers is 38 years of age, going on 39 during the season. And he's replacing Jacoby Brissett for $25 million for a 1-year deal. But he's replacing a quarterback who's more accurate than him, which is something people find hard to believe just because of their perceptions. Philip Rivers' arm has died. He worked with Frank Reich 5 years ago. Frank Reich was under Ken Wisenhunt from 2013 to 2015. He was the quarterback's coach. Then he was the offensive coordinator, so he worked directly with Philip Rivers. I think the Colts and Frank Reich in particular are failing here by looking at Philip Rivers and thinking that's the guy who he was in 2013, 2015. But since 2015, his arm has dropped off dramatically. He has become a guy who struggles to throw the ball 15 yards on the field, struggles to throw the ball 20 yards on the field. If it's a vertical route, the ball is going to float and hang in the air. He didn't get away with that the last couple of years, but the Chargers have been able to offset it somehow with Mike Williams, who's been incredible. Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, exceptionally good. I talked about Keenan Allen previously. But these guys have been able to cover a lot for Philip Rivers' errors. So now you move him to Indianapolis, where they've traded their first-round pick for DeVar's Buckner, so they're not going to get one of these top-tier receivers that's available in the first round. And now they've got T.Y. Hilton, a very small receiver who needs precise passes, even though he's good at getting open downfield. Rivers is going to struggle to hit him. You've got Zach Pascal, who is just ineffective and not capable of being a second option on an offense. You've got Chester Rogers still there. You've got you've got a bunch of different receivers who aren't capable or aren't good enough to be where they are in the offense. And you've got Paris Campbell, who was taken ahead of Terry McLaurin last year, who's clearly been a mistake because Campbell was nowhere near what McLaurin was as a rookie. McLaurin was a superstar. Campbell just looks like he's a little bit of speed, and that's it.
He was injured, though, wasn't he? Campbell was injured for a good bit of the season, so not totally gone on him. Look, sorry, I just want to go back to Stefan Diggs because we did mention there was a bounty of picks that Stefan Diggs managed to generate for the Vikings, and yet he is also good enough to be able to transform an offense. Like I don't see there was a lot of people rushing to judgment on this that the Bills ended up getting fleeced here, but I'm not sure that's true.
I don't think they got fleeced. I think a first-round pick, which is essentially what it is, because the rest of them are 4th, 5th, 6th extra picks that don't really matter. A first-round pick for Stefan Diggs is good value, but the problem for the Bills is they're not going to maximize his value. He's going to be wide open all the time, and Josh Allen is so inaccurate. He misses wide receivers constantly. He was the worst deep passer in the league last year, and it just doesn't fit their identity. As a team, they need to focus on running the ball and building up their same identity they had from last year. Adding Stefan Diggs for a first-round pick, I don't think is going to dramatically change their offense, like you said. But Diggs is also so unfortunate. He did not want to be in Minnesota. He did not want to play with Kirk Cousins anymore. He's gone from an indoor stadium in the cold city to an outdoor stadium in the cold city with an even worse quarterback than he already had. He's the most unlucky wide receiver in the league.
It's not a great move. Ronan, did you have anything you want to say about either the Colts or indeed what Buffalo have done?
No, just Phil Rivers. Like, there have been comparisons drawn between him and Brady, especially in recent years, as their decline seems to be mirroring one another. And Brady's big complaint was that he didn't have the personnel to throw to. Phil Rivers can't have had that complaint in the last few seasons, so it'll be interesting to see how he gets on with the Colts. I do wonder, Jacoby Brissett is at a loose end now. Will Bill Belichick pick up the phone and say, do you want to come back and do this thing? Or is Jarrett Stidham going to be the guy for the Patriots next season? It's still up in the air.
Yeah, I have a feeling that it's going to be Stidham because there's an ego involved in Belichick that's going to be, I can do this. Look what I can do with Jarrett Stidham. I don't need you, Tom Brady.
It feels like Andy Dalton's been used as the pawn. It's like, if I can bring Andy Dalton in and win a championship with Andy Dalton, I can do anything. And we always see on First Take and all these debate shows, Jared, that who gets more credit, Belichick or Brady. We might find out this year who is the more talented of that combo.
Yeah, Brady's the system quarterback is the dig that they always put to him. A reminder that American football brought to you on the Snap in association with the Lingus College Football Classic, Navy versus Notre Dame at the Aviva on the 29th of August. You should get on to collegefootballireland.com. There's a couple of other things that we wanted to talk about. Calais Campbell was the other one. Is a 34-year-old Calais Campbell still very good, Cian?
I just don't want to brush past that Father Jack impression that was meant to be Bill Belichick there. I'm not sure where that was going. Calais Campbell he's a superstar defensive lineman, been one of the best defensive linemen in the league for a long time. He's just older now, but he's older while also playing, I think, 770 snaps last year, 790, something like that. He was one of the highest playing, most active defensive linemen in the league. And the quality that he brings is that he can play on the inside, play on the outside. He's an individual pass rusher who's going to win over and over, which is what the Ravens don't have. They franchise tagged Matt Judon, but he's not that caliber of player. They also added Michael Brockers, who's more of a run stopper. So they've obviously identified the defensive line as a big issue for them. Calais Campbell is a great addition. They got him for dirt cheap. But on more of a macro level, when it comes to the Jaguars and trading players away and the players coming off of the Jaguars roster, I think they're like a market inefficiency, or there's great value there because those guys were all clearly miserable playing for Tom Coughlin. And while they're all individually still very good, there was an atmosphere there that probably dragged them down a little bit and got them to play to a different level. And the Jaguars are now rebuilding and giving these guys away for nothing. AJ Bowie, Calais Campbell, like Ramsey was obviously already gone. But the Campbell value and the Ravens is huge. He's an addition that only pushes them closer to the Super Bowl. They were already nearly at.
Yeah, all right. It's going to be an amazing AFC. Guys, thanks very much for being part of the Snap this morning. At short notice, obviously, it's been a tumultuous 24 hours in the NFL. We'll do this properly again on Friday when we've had time to consider all the other moves. And as I said, there's still some big moves to fall. Where will Cam Newton end up playing next year? So that is your lot from OTB AM this morning. We'll have another episode for you tomorrow morning. Off the Ball back on your radios tonight from 7 o'clock. Porrick Harrington is going to join Joe Malloy, and obviously they'll be talking about the Ryder Cup and what's going to happen there. The US organisers were saying that they expect the Ryder Cup to go ahead as planned in September, which would be good news if they could, see a way for that to happen. Get over and subscribe to the OTB AM podcast. It's fully timestamped. It makes it very easy to find exactly what you want from this morning's show. Very thoughtful piece with Graham Hunter. We had Conan Byrne on talking about walking marathon today to try and raise funds for the Irish Cancer Society. We also had a good half an hour with Joe Brawley where he talked specifically about what's happening in the north and the role that the GA has to play and has played already in getting social distancing to seep into the culture when pubs are open, restaurants are open, and schools and colleges are still open as per the government directives. A reminder that that's what's happening on our island. We're with you every morning here on OTB AM from 7:30, Ireland's first and only sports breakfast show. We hope you enjoyed today. We hope that we've provided some bit of distraction from the rest of the news. Stay tuned to our social channels and we'll keep you up to date with all the rest of the cancellations and the repercussions from the cancellations